The daughter of the executed Grand Tutor, I was meant to die with my clan. Instead, Emperor Alexander dragged me into his golden cage. Is it mercy, or a more sadistic revenge? As he pins me down, whispering of a forbidden bloodline and a scandalous past, I realize he doesn't want my life. He wants to break my soul. My name is Sophia Dong. I am the current noble consort, the noble consort infamous for a vile rumor that I slept with eunuchs in the inner palace. My father was Grand Tutor Dong. He held power over court and country. With one hand, he stirred storms at court. With the other, he made the entire imperial clan tremble. But that power came to an abrupt end 3 years ago. In the 3rd month of the 13th year of Qinghe, the Empress Dowager died. Overnight, the Dong family was stripped to the bone. The mighty Grand Tutor Dong didn't even have time to leave himself a way out. He was shot through the heart in the street. A secret order came down from the imperial clan. Whoever brings the Grand Tutor's head will be granted high office and noble rank, and rewarded with 10,000 mu of fertile land. The Dong family fell in a single night. The retainers who once fawned at my father's gates went mad the moment they heard the order, scrambling to wash their hands clean. Worse still, some even stole my father's corpse from the street. In the chaos, blades have no eyes, and a body tossed from hand to hand cannot endure that kind of torment. In the end, only the head remained intact. The rest was carved away until nothing was left. And the one who carried my father's head to the imperial army to curry favor and claim the reward was my uncle. The Dong clan was wiped out, and I, the last orphan of the Dongs, Sophia Dong, escaped the catastrophe. The imperial white feather guards brought me into the palace. I saw that young emperor again, Sophia Dong. The man stood with his back to me. He wore a dark robe, his posture almost casual, yet his silhouette was all coldness and slaughter. This wasn't the first time I'd realized how terrifying Alexander Gu could be. My legs went weak before I could stop them. I forced down the hatred and fear choking my throat, dropped to my knees and said, "Your Majesty, what crime did the Dong family commit? What crime could make you slaughter us to the last?" "Oh." Alexander Gu laughed, sharp and mocking. "Grand Tutor Dong's precious pearl, and you truly don't know what your family is guilty of." His smile dripped with sarcasm, his tone thin with contempt. Then he turned, and in the next breath crossed the distance to me in a few quick steps. I had seen Alexander Gu when I was 8. That year, the late emperor died and a new emperor took the throne. Dowager Empress Pei ruled from behind the curtain. The Dong family's power was just beginning to surge, and the Dowager Empress issued a decree that shocked the court. Send the young emperor to the Dong household to study the arts of kingship. The young emperor was Alexander Gu. Such a move had never been heard of. In the minister's eyes, the son of heaven had no need to learn the arts of kingship from a mere subject. It was absurd beyond belief. But that year the Dong family held the court in a stranglehold. The ministers dared not speak, no matter how furious they were. And so Alexander Gu truly was sent to the Dong household. I was 8. Alexander Gu was 10. I was the Grand Tutor's only daughter. Father doted on me, indulged me to excess. Everyone in the residence sheltered me, tightly guarded. But Alexander Gu was different from everyone else. I knew his status was exalted, yet my father treated him with little respect. Even the people around father looked at him sideways. Alexander Gu acted as though he didn't see any of it. He was cold to everyone, including me. That day he sat alone by the lake, eyes half closed, resting. Dappled light flickered across his brow, beautiful in a way that made my chest tighten. I remember thinking, how could there be such a handsome boy in the world? He was so good-looking that I wanted to disturb him. "Alexander Gu!" I shouted. I saw his relaxed brow knit sharply. When he opened his eyes, a chill flashed through them. He snapped, "You should call me the Emperor." For a moment he scared me. Then indignation surged. Father had never scolded me like that. My spoiled temper flaring, I charged over and shoved him into the lake. The instant the boy hit the water, his pupils contracted. He flailed, trying to save himself, but only sank faster. He couldn't swim? "Help me!" he finally cried. But I lifted my chin and ignored him. I thought, he's the Emperor. How could he not even float? He must be playing tricks on me. Yet the harder he thrashed, the more panic clawed at me. Then Father's voice rang out. "Are you all blind? Hurry and pull the Emperor up." When Alexander Gu was hauled out, he was drenched. His small face had gone ashen, his already fair skin glazed with something like frost. It was the second month after winter had set in. The leaves had long since fallen. Alexander Gu trembled like a dead leaf on the ground. After that, I didn't see him again. I only heard he'd fallen terribly ill. The palace sent ginseng and tonics by the cartload to the tutor's residence. Even imperial physicians moved in. I thought, what a delicate little emperor. At last, the court could no longer endure it. The ministers submitted memorials in a chorus, urging the Dowager Empress to bring the emperor back to the palace. Even she couldn't withstand the pressure. Besides, the new dynasty had only just been established. The outer court and inner palace could not afford open discord. So she agreed. By spring, Alexander Gu had recovered and was ready to return to the palace. I had meant not to see him off, but somehow I followed behind father anyway. Eunuchs helped Alexander Gu into the sedan chair. He was still cold and distant. When his gaze swept the crowd, it held no ripples at all. Until that empty gaze landed on me, my face flushed, suddenly and shamefully red. 8 years later, the boy was no longer a boy. His eyes were still indifferent, but the chill in them was enough to terrify. And I, Sophia Dong, was no longer the little princess of the tutor's residence, pampered into getting whatever I wanted. I had become the daughter of a condemned minister, kneeling at Alexander Gu's feet. Grand Tutor Dong's precious pearl truly doesn't know what her family is guilty of? Alexander Gu stood on the steps and looked down at me, like a god untouched by dust. In his deep pupils, my trembling reflection quivered. "Please see the truth, Emperor," I said, prostrate on the ground, and slammed my forehead down hard. I knew I must have drawn blood. "What a lovely 'please see the truth,'" Alexander Gu sneered. The next moment, a searing pain speared through the back of my hand. The sole of his shoe, set with gold and jade, ground down on my hand. Perhaps he meant it casually, but the pain tore a scream out of me. I looked up and saw a memorial in his hand. It was more than 10 pages long. Every page was filled with names marked in red ink. In a daze, I saw my uncle's name, and on the cover the title read, "Statement of Crimes of Vincent Dong." So that was it. Father had been framed long ago. The ministers had long resented his tyranny, and the one who betrayed him was his closest younger brother. The pain in my hand was nothing compared to the crushing ache in my chest. I had watched the entire household butchered. I had seen father's corpse dragged apart, his head hung on the city wall. And why did I deserve to live? This night was so long. When would it end? After this night, the capital's sky changed. Such a monstrous extermination was completely suppressed by the imperial clan. Only the Grand Tutor's head, slowly weathering atop the wall, remained as proof. The Dong family's last breath had been cut off for good. In that silence, secret tales began to rise and spread underground. Alexander Gu had sat the throne for 8 years. Only last night did he become the true king, the sole king of the Helian imperial clan. And I was imprisoned in Goldenpool Palace for 3 full days. Goldenpool Palace had once been the late Empress Dowager's private palace. Back when father entered the palace to discuss affairs, he always came through Goldenpool Palace. Alexander Gu spoke to me only on the first day. After that, he had the maids pin me down and pierce my palm with a sharp dagger. Blood streamed into a bowl, clouding clear water and pulsing ribbons. Under my stunned gaze, Alexander Gu pricked his own finger and let his blood drip into the water. 2 droplets drifted closer, slowly mingling. At my side, the man's presence was cold enough to freeze bone. And in that instant, I realized the secret father had buried. Between the Empress Dowager and Grand Tutor Dong, it had never been only ruler and minister. It had been something far more intimate. Lovers? I didn't know. Deep down, I refused to accept words like male favorite. If that were true, then Alexander Gu and I might be brother and sister. How ridiculous. Sophia Dong, bound to the imperial clan by blood. I couldn't help letting out a cold laugh. Beside me, Alexander Gu's eyes reddened with rage, so intense it was almost animal. But in the next moment, my illusion shattered. The blood in the bowl began to separate again, forming 2 distinct clusters. I don't know if it was my imagination, but I seemed to hear a faint exhale. Alexander Gu waved a hand, dismissing the maids. By candlelight, I finally saw what he looked like as a grown man. He was still beautiful. But now that beauty carried too much darkness. His eyes were black as inked game pieces. His lips were thin and pale. Even pressed together, they held a nameless pressure. "Why don't you kill me?" I asked. I understood that after learning such secrets of the imperial clan, I had no chance of surviving. That single charge against my father, debauchery in the inner palace, was enough for them to kill me 100 times over. I was no longer a carefree young lady behind high gates. I was a condemned minister's daughter. If I wanted to live, I had to know what I was worth. Alexander Gu didn't answer. He only kept me locked in Golden Pool Palace. For 3 days, I lacked nothing. Food and clothing were plentiful. The palace servants attended me with care. Aside from being unable to step outside the palace doors, it almost felt more lavish than my life at home. Not until the 3rd day did I learn why. Noble consort Dong, these are the consort seals and book of investiture bestowed by the emperor. We've brought them to you. Rows of maids and eunuchs knelt before me. I recognized the eunuch leading them. It was Eunuch Harold, the chief palace eunuch, who had once come to the Dong household. I had never expected Alexander Gu to make such a move. I knew my looks weren't enough to make him set aside hatred and willingly bring me into the harem. But I couldn't see Alexander Gu. I could only catch scraps of palace talk from the maids. 3 days ago, the emperor favored you at Golden Pool Palace. He granted you the title of noble consort on the spot. He said once you recovered, the formal investiture would follow. Your rank as noble consort is the highest in the harem. The maid assigned to me was Chloe, a 13-year-old girl. She likely knew nothing of the Dong family's history and didn't know I was the surviving remnant of a condemned house. Her innocence made my heart sink. Once I had been that innocent too. I was made noble consort. I could move freely within the palace. My status was undeniably exalted. Yet the more I had, the more uneasy I became. I couldn't understand what Alexander Gu could possibly want with me. If it wasn't for use, then what else could it be? On the 15th day of the 8th month, the reunion festival, the whole palace celebrated. Even outside Golden Pool Palace, servants began to laugh and play. A rumor had spread, saying I, noble consort Dong, was vicious and domineering, with several servants' lives on my hands. So whenever they saw me, they were cautious to the point of trembling. "Mid-autumn," I murmured. I lay in a rocking chair with my hair loose, staring at the clouds. They were heavy and dark. There wasn't even the faint outline of the moon. A day like this, and it had to be overcast. If anyone saw me now, they would be frightened. My face was deathly pale, soaked in tears. My hair hung loose over a white robe. I looked like a ghost. Late at night, the laughter outside stopped abruptly. Low, heavy footsteps approached. Alexander Gu had come. With my back to him, I said with bitter mockery, "What brings you here?" "Oh, right. Should I be calling myself your concubine?" I wasn't trying to die. My mind was simply beyond words. Part of me feared him, part of me hated him. And in the darkest corner of me, there was even a thread of longing. Longing for what? For him to grant me death? As expected, I heard a soft, cold scoff. Those light but heavy steps moved 2 paces closer. A vast shadow swallowed my body. And at the same time, a strong reek of wine flooded my nose. I lifted my head on instinct and met a pair of eyes, clouded and oppressive. My heart dropped, as if falling into a bottomless abyss. I scrambled off the rocking chair like an animal fleeing a trap. He had been drinking? He was drunk? I stood on the steps, frowning at the man beside the chair. He still held a bent posture, rigid, as if he hadn't noticed I'd slipped away. If I hadn't moved, our eyes would have met at that exact angle. "Heh. And where do you think you can run?" Alexander Gu said. His voice was thick and sticky, but his contempt was razor-sharp. When he looked up at me, the fog in his eyes cleared at once, and hatred filled the depths. "What do you want?" I stared at him, not daring to miss a single movement. Behind my back, my hand clenched a pearl hairpin. It was only him. If he came closer, could I kill him? I had nothing left. Only this cheap life, one I could gamble to avenge father. This filthy palace, I didn't want to stay another moment. Alexander Gu seemed truly drunk. He walked toward me step by unsteady step. Under his gaze, I felt like a chick caught in a predator's sights. My grip on the hairpin tightened. As he drew near, I could almost see the pulse in his throat. He stopped half a step away. I bit down hard, thinking, still too far. Striking now would be too risky. As I calculated how to move for the best chance, Alexander Gu spoke. "What, want to kill me?" As the words fell, he swept a hand out and seized my waist. My pupils shrank in shock. I drove the hairpin forward, only to have his other hand catch my wrist in midair. Ah! Pain exploded through my wrist. The hairpin clattered to the floor, and in the deep night the sound vanished almost at once. With that, Alexander Gu glanced down at it, then abruptly released my waist and flung me hard against a pillar. He even shook his hand with disgust, as if he'd touched something filthy. My tears surged again. Eyes burning red, I forced the words out. Why don't you kill me?" Alexander Gu turned his eyes slightly. Cold light burst forth. His pale frost-like profile was warmed by the red candles on the palace wall, yet nothing could warm the chill clinging to him. "Sophia Dong," he said. "I'll tell you why." Then, before my stunned eyes, he placed his icy hand on my throat and tightened, little by little. My breath was taken from me, inch by inch. I closed my eyes, thinking, this isn't a pleasant way to die. I had imagined 10,000 deaths. I had never imagined I would be strangled by Alexander Gu. He really did hate me. But the expected suffocation never came. Instead, sharp pain tore at my neck. Alexander Gu buried his face in the hollow of my throat and bit down viciously. I felt blood well beneath his teeth and trickle downward. "Alexander Gu, what do you want?" I shoved at his shoulder with all my strength, but he didn't budge. As if that still wasn't enough, he yanked and tore open my outer robe. Half my shoulder was exposed to the air. He found the spot and bit down again. In the darkness, his eyes gleamed with slaughter. My blood stained his lips bright red. He looked like a beast, and I was the lamb between his jaws. I knew I couldn't hide, and I couldn't break free. So I let him bite me, thinking only that pain, too, could make a person numb. The second bite wasn't as hard. I thought once he'd vented his anger, it would end. But he didn't stop. He scooped me up and threw me onto the bed in the sleeping chamber. "Alexander Gu, are you done yet?" I fought through the pain, propping myself up and staring at the man who looked half-crazed at the bedside. Black hair, dark robe, lips smeared with blood, eyes like a deep abyss. Alexander Gu must be the karmic enemy from my past life, a demon from hell, come to drag me away. He didn't answer. He leaned down and pressed his weight onto me. To keep me from struggling, he tore down the bed curtain and bound my wrists with it. Sick. He was sick. "Alexander Gu, kill me if you want, tear me apart if you want, just don't torture me like this." The shame rising from my core made me regret not killing myself sooner. At least then I wouldn't have to endure this. Alexander Gu's body burned hot. Under the play of his fingers, my body began to shiver, then burn with heat as well. The heavy stench of wine forced itself into my nose and mouth. Beneath it lingered the faint scent of sandalwood. I knew that scent. I had smelled it when I was 8. That year, after Alexander Gu fell into the water and grew gravely ill, I had sneaked in to see him while he was unconscious. His pale, lovely face had been slick with sweat, and every bead carried that soothing, faint sandalwood. But the man before me was no longer weak. His strength could have crushed me. Yet he didn't crush me. He slowly peeled open my inner robe, inch by inch. His cool, rough fingertips rested on my collarbone, rubbing the bite marks he himself had left. I turned my face away, unwilling to see his expression. I clenched my teeth and endured the strange sensation rising beneath the pain. "Sophia Dong, you can't kill me, and you can't escape." Alexander Gu leaned close to my ear and delivered the words with ridicule. His hand at my waist had already undone my undergarments. "Alexander Gu, you disgust me." My voice was low, each word clear and hard. Even as my body shook like a sieve, I still locked my eyes on him. I was afraid that if I hesitated even for a moment, the man on top of me would go further. Sure enough, Alexander Gu stopped. The hand that had already reached between my thighs withdrew. In the space of a breath, he pulled away from the bed. My clothes were undone. I looked like a woman ruined to the end. Blood smeared my neck. If I closed my eyes, anyone would think I was already dead. Alexander Gu faced away from me, so I couldn't see his expression. The lingering, chaotic scent in the air reminded me of what had almost happened. "Sophia Dong," he said softly. "In this palace, do whatever you please." I must have lost my mind, because I heard something in his voice that sounded like, "You're allowed to be willful." "I will kill you," I forced out through clenched teeth. Hatred swelled until it nearly overflowed. And that fierce hatred gave me a hunger to live I had never known. Live. Kill Alexander Gu. Noble consort, he said, you can try. Then he called out, guards, the noble consort is ill. Without looking back, Alexander Gu strode out of Golden Pool Palace. Chloe was the first to rush in. When she saw me like this on the bed, her face went white. She hurried over and wrapped me tightly in the bedding. Noble consort, the emperor. She stammered. No matter how naive Chloe was, she could see something was wrong. These marks were not the result of tenderness. A 13-year-old child had never seen anything like it. She burst into tears, snot and all. Chloe, I'm fine. Help me apply medicine. I'll sleep and it'll pass. We should call the imperial physician. These cuts will scar. No need. At this point, why would I care whether my body was ruined? It was only a body. Even if Alexander Gu had forced himself on me tonight, I still wouldn't have chosen death. His torment only made me want to live more. Live. So I can kill him. After that, I was ill for half a month. No matter how stubborn I was, the instinctive fear Alexander Gu carved into me had sunk into my bones. It was like a cold blade, slicing through flesh and plunging into my heart until I couldn't breathe. The wound on my collarbone left a scar, 2 savage rows of bite marks, glaring to the eye. I always tied a plain white ribbon around my neck to hide it, because I'd known since childhood. The harem is a man-eating demon, and the only antidote is the emperor's favor. I didn't need that kind of favor. But if I wanted to live comfortably in the harem, I needed the appearance of it. In the months since Alexander Gu seized power, outwardly he had favored only one consort, me. If I went out with these marks on my neck, who knew what gossip would spread? But by some cruel coincidence, the ribbon at my throat was repeated from mouth to mouth and carried beyond the palace. Soon the capital was swept up in a new fashion, the noble consort's neck wrap. From noble women and sheltered daughters down to girls in academies, everyone followed the trend. Stories even spread of how harmonious the emperor and the noble consort were. In the palace, I listened to those star-like rumors, distant and absurd, and couldn't help mocking myself. If those pious fools knew that I, noble consort Dong, am the pitiful leftover from the Dong family, Alexander Gu exterminated just days ago, would they still call us a perfect match? Under the blazing sun, I sat in the light. The heat made it hard to open my eyes, yet it felt like a kind of pleasure, as if sunlight could burn the filth off me. Noble consort, the Imperial Household Department is sending people over for you. Take a look. Eunuch Harold arrived with 7 or 8 young eunuchs trailing behind him, each with head bowed and shoulders hunched. The sight made me frown. I didn't know what Alexander Gu was planning. I already had plenty of eunuchs in my palace. Why send more? Take them away. I don't need them, I said curtly. Yet, out of the corner of my eye, I caught the side profile of one young eunuch. It wasn't that I meant to notice him. I couldn't help it. His face was the kind you looked at once, and then looked again. Eunuch Harold saw my expression. He quickly pushed the young eunuch forward. Noble consort, this is Alfie, chosen by the Imperial Household Department. They're all clean, every one of them. The old eunuch's voice was sharp and grating, so unpleasant it pierced my ears. I didn't want to hear him prattle on. I waved a hand, told him to leave 2 behind, and take the rest away. He left Alfie, and another eunuch who called himself Rory. Noble consort, Alfie said, kneeling with his head lowered. I'm 17 this year. I will serve you well from now on. In the height of summer, cicadas screamed, loud and unending. From the day Alfie arrived in my palace, he stayed at my side without leaving. Noble consort, I'll go out and catch those cicadas in the courtyard, Alfie said timidly. I looked at his delicate, handsome face and couldn't help asking, what kind of family were you born into before you entered the palace? Most palace eunuchs had a softness to them, but their skin was roughened by years of hard labor. Yet this one was smooth and fine, as if he'd never suffered hardship. Alexander Gu's attitude toward me was unclear. Anyone he sent had to be watched. Noble consort, Alfie replied, his voice dropping even lower. I used to be in Prince James's household, serving the old prince. By the end, his voice was so small it could barely be heard. But I understood at once why he was uneasy. The old Prince James was known throughout the capital for his taste in men. Alfie had been kept at his side and was handsome and graceful. The nature of their relationship was obvious. I couldn't help a cold laugh. So, Alexander Gu? Why go in circles to humiliate me with a servant? Why bother sending a former prince's bedmate to my side? On the 15th day of the 9th month came the moon-offering grand banquet. I didn't want to attend any feast of Alexander Gu's, but at the moon-offering grand banquet, outside officials would enter the palace. That meant I would have a chance to see my good uncle. Dressed in plain white, wearing a white crown, I stepped over the banquet threshold, blatantly out of place. Chloe said worriedly, "Noble consort, if you wear this, the emperor will be angry." Am I supposed to be afraid of him? I let out a mocking laugh. I looked up and saw Alexander Gu seated high at the head of the feast. One hand propped his chin, the other held a wine cup. He chatted pleasantly with the ministers below. Then his gaze fell on me. His brow tightened and a chill spread through his eyes. I lowered my gaze and saw Marcus Dong, my uncle, seated in a corner. He looked flustered when he saw me. But there was more than panic on his face, something I couldn't name. He parted his lips as if to smile, but my distance robbed him of it. He stayed where he was, watching me, until I gave him a slight nod and left him an ugly, contemptuous smile. The corner of his mouth stiffened at once. If Alexander Gu was the one who held the blade and slaughtered my family, then Marcus Dong was the one who handed him the knife. I hated his betrayal more than I hated Alexander Gu. The ministers at the banquet pointed and whispered about my clothing. Some were Alexander Gu's close men. Recognizing who I was, they clicked their tongues in open scorn. I walked without hesitation and sat down at Alexander Gu's side. There was no empress. If I didn't sit there, who would? I knew it was overstepping. I did it anyway, without a shred of apology. Leaning close to Alexander Gu's ear, I asked with a smiling voice, "How many people here followed you in killing the Dong family?" Alexander Gu tipped his head back and swallowed a mouthful of wine, then answered with a cold laugh, "All of them." My hand trembled twice. My lips shook uncontrollably. Those men seated in honor, every one of them was stained with Dong blood. And yet they smiled and drank, mocking the Dong family's lone survivor for living like a parasitic worm. All the ministers were trying to catch Alexander Gu's attention. Only Marcus Dong kept his eyes on me all the way until I left the banquet, because I knew he would follow. "Sophie," he called timidly. That name, Sophie, was a name only he used for me. Sophie. Sophie. He had given it to me the year I was born. But now everything had changed. The man before me was no longer the man from back then. "Why?" I shouted. It wasn't a question, it was hatred spilling out. "You wouldn't understand," Marcus Dong said. "Your father had no way out. But you do. Listen to me. I'll keep you safe." He reached out as if to touch me. I flung his hand away. Then my palm cracked across his face with a sharp slap. And at the same time, I understood something. "You begged Alexander Gu not to kill me." It was the only explanation I could think of. Marcus Dong nodded. His brow creased into deep lines, as if he were forcing something down. "I heard father say grandfather died on the battlefield when father was 10. You were 5 then. My father raised you, taught you, supported you into office. Everything you have today, every step, is because of father. And you, vile, shameless, disgusting, traded your family's lives for your own glory." "Marcus Dong," I said, each word merciless, my heart twisted tight with hate. "Why didn't you die instead?" "Sophie, enough," Marcus Dong shouted. To me, it was only because he couldn't bear the shame of his own ugliness. "Get out," I said. "One day I'll kill you with my own hands." I left him with those final words, turned away, and didn't look back. Only when his footsteps faded did I turn my head. As my anger cooled, I replayed what he'd said. Something didn't add up. Why had he saved only me? He'd been close to me when I was little, but in recent years he rarely came home, and I hardly saw him. Questions snarled in my mind, until a familiar voice snapped me back. "Noble consort, why are you here? Hurry back to the palace. Something happened to Chloe." The one who ran up was Ivy, a maid who served me in the palace. The moment she mentioned Chloe, my heart jumped into my throat. In these months inside the palace, only Chloe had treated me with sincerity. I didn't care about the banquet. I didn't care about anything else. I ran straight for Golden Pool Palace, but when I returned, Chloe was nowhere to be seen. Even Ivy, who had brought me back, had vanished. A cold unease swept over me. I'd been frantic and foolish. Chloe should have been at the banquet attending me. Why would she suddenly return to the palace? I spun to leave Golden Pool Palace, only to find the doors tightly shut. And from inside my sleeping chamber came a strange, muffled sound, like someone sobbing into cloth. "Who's there?" I shouted. No one answered. The muffled sound only grew louder. I pushed open the chamber door, forcing myself to be brave, and saw only Alfie. He was on the floor, writhing in agony as if something were tearing him apart. When he saw me, he lunged. I wasn't prepared. He knocked me onto my back. At that moment, the palace doors opened. Alexander Gu entered Golden Pool Palace with a group of attendants. And Chloe stood at his side, smiling warmly as she looked down at me in my disgrace. In an instant, everything seemed to have an answer. "Your high consort. What refined leisure." Alexander Gu's mouth twitched as if he hadn't expected to see this. And truly, with Alfie pinning me to the floor and my clothes half undone, anyone would think the worst. The high consort can't bear being alone, so she finds a handsome little eunuch to soothe her? How ridiculous. I thought I'd been careful. Yet the person closest to me had set me up. I had asked Chloe how she'd ended up in the palace. The palace was nothing like the outside world. The servants here weren't bought at random. Those lowly eunuchs and maids might once have been the sons and daughters of high officials. Chloe had said, my family held only a tiny, insignificant post. A few years ago, the court fell into chaos. My father was dismissed, and I was punished by being sent into the palace. I'd had no reason to doubt her. She was always cautious and timid. I pitied her, kept thinking I should keep her safe. But the girl who usually trembled at everything now stood behind Alexander Gu like a ghost. She put on a terrified expression and shrieked at me. "My lady, how could you do this? The Emperor, he..." She didn't finish before Alexander Gu's terrifying stare silenced her, but a sentence cut off halfway was the best way to let people's imaginations run wild. "If the rank of high consort can't hold you," Alexander Gu said from above, like the god I'd first seen in the palace, "then go keep a eunuch company. But not this eunuch." Alfie was dragged up and hauled to a long bench in the outer courtyard. Two burly guards raised man-wide wooden staves and brought them down on the little eunuch's lower body again and again, defiling the inner palace, disturbing the royal purity, death. As Alexander Gu's words fell, the staves fell silent too. An old eunuch reported, "Alfie is dead." I stared at the bench, at the mangled blur of flesh and blood. The body atop it had long since stopped breathing. I knew Alfie had been beaten to death while he wasn't even fully conscious. A retch surged up my throat. I had never seen anything so bloody. Even when my entire household was slaughtered, I had already been taken into the palace. I hadn't witnessed the carnage. Alexander Gu walked to the steps and looked straight into my eyes. He sneered, "Since you like eunuchs, I'll grant you Eli." The moment he spoke, a trembling little eunuch stepped out of the crowd. He dropped to his knees and wailed, "Spare me, Emperor." I said, "Alexander Gu, why disgust me like this? Aren't you tired?" Then I turned, my gaze cutting through the crowd to Chloe's face. I mocked her. "Chloe, I don't know what grudge you have against the Dong family, but your methods are still lacking. Alexander Gu won't let me die." The moment I finished, Chloe's expression shifted. Panic flashed across her face, yet she still tried to look calm, as though she feared nothing. She lifted her childish face and hissed, "I am the daughter of Theodore Wu of the former court. Sophia Dong, your Dong family deserves death. Your father deserves death. And you deserve death most of all." She lunged forward like lightning. The guards didn't even have time to react. In one swift stride, she was in front of me, a dagger clenched tight in her hand. One more inch and it would have pierced my chest. But the pain never came. The blood did. Alexander Gu lifted his hand and brought his sword down. Chloe's head was severed on the spot. Blood surged out, splattering the ground, and my heart nearly burst in my chest. A loud ringing filled my ears. In the end, I was only a sheltered girl who had never seen such things. Chloe's father was Theodore Wu, a minister of Jinghe in the former court, and she was his only daughter. 10 years ago, the late emperor died. The new emperor ascended. Dowager Empress Pei ruled from behind the curtain. The young emperor held no real power. My father, Grand Tutor Dong, stirred storms through the court. Theodore Wu was a powerful official, upright all his life, never harming others. But because of a few words he spoke in court, my father judged him to have rebel intent. Within 3 days, the Wu family's former court network was wiped clean. Chloe's father, uncles, and brothers were all thrown into prison. Her mother and sisters-in-law refused humiliation and died by smashing their heads against pillars. 361 members of the clan were exiled. And Chloe's direct relatives, who were still minors, girls were sent into the palace as consorts and attendants, and boys were sent in to be eunuchs. Chloe's only younger brother didn't survive the torment inside the palace. Only she remained, barely alive. Drag her away. Alexander Gu's voice held not the slightest pity. The stench of blood made me nauseous. Red shadows swam before my eyes, and my vision slowly blurred. In the end, I couldn't even lift my hand. Alexander Gu, don't let me wake up again. Just let me die. After my last words, I fainted. When I woke, everything around me had changed. Broken tables and chairs, peeling walls. Beneath me was a cheap straw mat. You're awake? The sudden male voice startled me. I sprang up on instinct. My name is Eli. I'm the one granted to you as your paired meal. I know you're the high consort, and I also know. Enough. I covered my ears, refusing to hear another word. My eyes widened in terror. Alexander Gu had gone mad. Why wouldn't he just kill me properly? Did he not care about his own reputation? Would he really let a high consort rumored to be involved with a eunuch go on living with a eunuch? You. No, my lady. The high consort. I won't do anything to you. I have an older sister about your age, so... Eli scratched his head. He looked shy, nothing remarkable. Why would Alexander Gu give me to him? I understood soon enough. Eli was a personal eunuch at Alexander Gu's side. Giving me to one of his eunuchs was humiliation, measured to the last drop. My, Sophia, from now on, you'll serve the emperor with me in Golden Throne Hall. I'll teach you what to do. Eli was extremely careful around me. Maybe my crazed state that morning had frightened him. Overnight, I fell from high consort to a eunuch's paired meal. As the lowest-ranking palace maid in Golden Throne Hall, my lodging was a side room off the hall. Those side rooms existed so the palace servants could better attend the emperor. Eli, as the emperor's close personal eunuch, naturally had to stay there at all times. I waited there too, while thinking, again and again, about how to kill Alexander Gu. If I'd had 10 pairs of eyes, all 10 would have been fixed on him, searching for every weakness. Alexander Gu sat behind a screen reading memorials. Sometimes he would flare up and fling them to the floor. Everyone in the hall dropped to their knees, terrified into silence. Sophia, kneel, Eli whispered, tugging at my skirt, but I stood rigid, glaring viciously at the man behind the screen. Get over here, Alexander Gu barked. The tail end of his voice still trembled with anger. No one moved. No one knew who he meant. Sophia Dong, he snapped again. Through the screen, I saw his icy eyes and the deep crease between his brows. I forced down my hatred and walked over with my chin lifted. The servants wisely withdrew. Eli could only glance at me with worry as he left with them. The moment I stepped past the screen, the inkstone on the desk caught my eye. In a flash, I snatched it up and hurled it at Alexander Gu. He simply shifted aside and dodged. The inkstone struck the floor with a deafening crash, leaving a deep dent. Still trying to kill me? Alexander Gu lifted a brow. Maybe it was my imagination, but he seemed almost pleased. How could he suddenly be in a good mood? He'd been furious just now. There was a rat, I lied without blinking. So you're concerned for my safety, Alexander Gu murmured with a soft chuckle, then lowered his head back to the memorials. I asked, what deal did you make with Marcus Dong? If Marcus Dong had spared me, there had to be conditions. Judging by how much Alexander Gu indulged me, the price couldn't have been small. Oh? Alexander Gu didn't look up? He didn't tell you? I'd never imagined I could hide my meeting with Marcus Dong from him. In this palace, what grass or tree could escape his watch? Tell me what, I frowned. The truth felt closer and closer, pressing in. Heh? Alexander Gu laughed lightly. Marcus Dong is your real father. The words hit me out of nowhere. My head roared. My teeth chattered uncontrollably. What was he saying? Marcus Dong was my real father? You're lying, I shouted, staring into his eyes, searching for even the faintest trace of deceit. He seemed to enjoy my expression. Brows lifted, he replied with quiet delight, I never lie. I don't remember how I fled. I only remember running in panic, stumbling the whole way. I crouched beneath the dark red palace wall, arms wrapped around my knees. My heart was ice cold, yet my head burned. Eli came looking for me. "Why is your face so red?" He reached out and pressed a hand to my forehead. The instant he touched me, he recoiled. "So hot. Sophia, you have a fever." A fever," I mumbled, and my thoughts drifted away. Darkness swallowed me. When I woke again, I wasn't on a straw mat. Beneath me was smooth silk embroidered with coiling cloud dragons. In the dim candlelight sat a blurred figure. "You're awake," the figure said. My whole body began to shake. "Alexander Gu, kill me." I truly couldn't take it anymore. I was breathing hard. My eyes burned and swelled. My back teeth clenched tight. This man was too terrifying. I couldn't guess what he was thinking or what he would do next. Whatever he chose to give me, I could only accept it. That helplessness was terror. I had never been this afraid. His back stiffened for a moment, but he didn't turn around. In a daze, I heard a soft laugh. "I told you," he said. "You can't escape." Wanting to die is also escape. I sucked in a sharp breath. "Alexander Gu, I only pushed you once as a child. You fell into the lake and were sick for half a month. I don't think I ever offended you otherwise, right?" I stared at the tassels hanging from the curtain. I lifted my hand and grasped at empty air, my voice like a sigh. "Alexander Gu, let me go." There was a faint rustle. My body tensed. The bedding beside me dipped. Without asking, Alexander Gu lay down next to me. His breathing, deep, then shallow, brushed my neck. That familiar sandalwood scent drilled into my nose again. I held my breath and closed my aching eyes. Tears slid down my cheeks but didn't reach the pillow. They fell onto his fingertips. His cold thumb tipped my chin up and traced the curve of my lips. After a long while, he said, "Don't run. Don't run." I frowned and turned my head, only to see his eyes closed, as if he'd already fallen asleep. I sat up to leave, but something tugged at my skirt. I looked down. A hand gripped it tight. That night, I tore my skirt and fled Golden Throne Hall. Back in the side quarters, I ignored Eli's worried look and locked myself in my room. Outside, the moon was bright. Inside, the candles blazed. But none of that light belonged to me. The only thing that did was the copper scissors beneath the candlestick. With one decisive movement, I finally made up my mind to die. The Dong family was wiped out, and I alone survived. The father who had loved me for over 10 years wasn't my real father. My real father was the very man who had shoved my life into the abyss. "Father, I'm coming to find you." For the first time since entering the palace, I smiled. But reality proved Alexander Gu was a true demon. I didn't die. Instead, I saw that face I loathed again. The same shabby room, and Alexander Gu in splendid robes that didn't belong there. Since when did Alexander Gu lower himself to this filthy place where eunuchs lived? Eli knelt in the corner. Blood streaked his face. His body shook like a cicada in summer. I didn't need to guess. This was Alexander Gu's doing. "Sophia, you're finally awake." Eli looked at me pleadingly, but before he could say more, Alexander Gu scared him into silence. Eunuch Harold understood the emperor's mind best. He immediately pinched his broken gone voice into a sharp shout. "Wretched slave, this is the high consort. How dare you address her by her given name? Get out and take 60 strokes." Yes, my title as high consort hadn't been stripped. Alexander Gu had only thrown me here to be a eunuch's paired meal for a while. Even I found it laughable. After dying once, I understood. As long as Alexander Gu didn't want me dead, I couldn't die. When they led me away from Eli's quarters, he had already taken 30 strokes. His small frame swayed in the air like it might snap. If they truly struck him 60 times, he wouldn't survive. What's the point of beating him? I won't try to die again. Alexander Gu glanced at me coolly and waved off the men carrying out the punishment. When I saw Eli again, he was even more timid. Limping as he worked, he often spilled tea bowls. His right leg was ruined. I kept thinking of what he'd said when he tried to reassure me he wouldn't offend me. He'd said, "Sophia, you're the same age as my sister, and you even look like her. I'll protect you. I won't insult you, and if one day the emperor wants to kill you, I'll die with you." We were strangers who met by chance, yet I still ruined him. The weather turned cold. That suicide attempt wrecked my strength. For nearly 2 months, I couldn't leave my bed. Alexander Gu arranged a new residence for me, Plum Garden behind Golden Throne Hall. Plum Garden was ringed on all sides by a plum grove. Only one small palace stood at the center, compact but exquisite. In winter, it was especially beautiful. New Year's Eve was approaching. Alexander Gu was extremely busy. The affairs of the former court seemed troublesome. The last time I saw him, stubble shadowed his chin. The 14th year of Qinghe, year's end. Snow fell for half a month. The entire palace lay buried under it. Even the palace walls wore a cotton-like layer. Warm lamps filled my bedchamber. I sat in a rocking chair eating sweet fermented rice dumplings, drowsily watching the snow outside. Alexander Gu strode into the courtyard wrapped in a black cloak. Snow dusted the fur at his collar, making his face look even paler. He was in a good mood, smiling all the way inside. A face like his rarely smiled, yet when it did, it was dazzling. He said, "Sophia, a great victory in the Guangdong campaign. The lost lands of the former court have finally been recovered." Of course I knew. The one who won back that lost realm for him was my uncle. No, my father. Marcus Dong. Marcus Dong, the fiercest general of the realm. For his sake alone, Alexander Gu could not kill me. When I ignored him, Alexander Gu came over and snatched my bowl of dumplings. He swallowed the remaining ones in a few big bites. The instant he did, his brow furrowed. "Too sweet," I shot back. "There's leftover chilled bitter melon in the small kitchen. That's bitter. Go taste it." Maybe it was because I hadn't laughed in so long, especially not at Alexander Gu. He froze, startled, then played along. "Fine. Then today's noon meal will be a bitter melon feast. You'll eat it too." "Why should I eat it? If you like suffering, suit yourself. I don't. Eat your ridiculous bitter melon feast alone." I lifted my head and met his gaze. Something shifted in Alexander Gu's eyes. The deep chill slowly melted, revealing tenderness. After a long pause, he crouched and wrapped both arms around my waist. "Sophia, can we live like this from now on?" "Live like this?" I murmured, mocking myself. "Alexander Gu, how am I supposed to live with a killer?" The arms around my waist went rigid. When he stood, his usual cold gloom returned. He fumbled in his robe and took out a small wicker spider. He set it beside me and left without looking back. I didn't know where he found these shabby little trinkets. Yet he brought me a different one every day. The day before yesterday, it was a wicker rabbit. Yesterday, a little horse. Today, a spider. On the dressing cabinet behind me, dozens already sat in all sizes. There was hardly room left. I sneered and tossed the spider to the floor. "Alexander Gu, do you think I'm a child?" That winter felt especially long. When the first spring rain fell, I fell ill. It hit like a collapsing mountain, without warning. I knew my own body. I never got sick from a little chill. This illness was strange. I was unconscious for 2 days. When I finally surfaced, heavy, muddled, I heard Alexander Gu scolding the imperial physician through the bed curtains. "If you can't find a way to cure the poison, then the Imperial Medical Bureau doesn't need to exist." Poison? I'd been poisoned? My meals were always prepared by the small kitchen of Golden Throne Hall, food made only for Alexander Gu. Poisoning them was nearly impossible, and I was never greedy. The poison couldn't have entered through my mouth. If I could think of that, Alexander Gu could too. But I never expected the first person he summoned would be Marcus Dong. It turned out the poison had been planted in my body since childhood, and the one who planted it was my father, Vincent Dong. "Sophie, Sophie, my Sophie." Marcus Dong called my name again and again, but I ignored him and pulled the quilt over my head. I refused to listen to his so-called truths. Back in the former court, Vincent Dong wasn't Grand Tutor Dong yet. He was the son of the Defender General. The old general died young. Vincent Dong was only 10. He had a betrothal. The other side was Clara Pei, the only daughter of Minister Pei. All the Dong family's glory depended on the general. Once he died, the Dong family lost its power. But the Pei family, aided by the Secretariat, rose to tremendous influence. The young Vincent Dong and Clara Pei grew up together. They had long been in love, yet love couldn't withstand a single imperial decree. The Pei family breaks the engagement with the Dong family. Clara Pei will marry into the royal family at once to be empress. Empress, perhaps the position every woman dreamed of. Yet Clara Pei refused. She loved Vincent Dong, and she knew he loved her. She planned to flee, but this time Vincent Dong retreated. 3 days later, Clara Pei entered the Eastern Palace in bridal robes and became the most honored empress of the realm. And later, Dowager Empress Pei. The late emperor was frail. The Secretariat held the reins of government. The Pei family stood at the center of the political storm, the very heart of court politics. Then Western Xia invaded. Vincent Dong finally had a chance to prove himself. He took command, rode out, and returned victorious. Even after returning in triumph, he was feared by the Secretariat. Add the old engagement with the Pei family, and Vincent Dong remained a thorn in the royal family's eye. So to ease old grudges, Vincent Dong married Grace Song, daughter of Minister Victor Song, a powerful official of the Secretariat. That same year, Empress Pei gave birth to the Crown Prince, Alexander Gu. The Dong family rose overnight and gradually came to stand as equals with the Pei family at court. 2 years later, Marcus Dong returned from the battlefield with a child. That child was me. I was the daughter of Marcus Dong and Reina Tuo, a female general of Western Xia. Half my blood was enemy blood. The realm couldn't accept my identity, and Marcus Dong couldn't bear the crime of treason, so I became Vincent Dong's daughter. That same year, my nominal mother, Grace Song, died in childbirth. But only the 2 Dong brothers knew the truth. Grace Song had never been pregnant. Enemy General Reina Tuo died in battle that June. Marcus Dong was consumed by grief. He began 8 years of never coming home, lingering on the battlefield and winning brilliant merit for the throne. No one knew that what he lingered for was only the shadow of the one person he truly loved. That year, Vincent Dong began his plot. He hated the royal family, hated the He royal house, so he wanted the imperial house to pay for what had happened back then. The Secretariat was mostly civil officials, and war was constant in those years. The Dong family's achievements were immense. Gradually, no one at court could rival the Dongs. 8 years later, the late emperor died. The Pei family fell completely. The Dong family held power over the whole court, and the plot Vincent Dong had laid out continued. Marcus Dong learned of it only by accident. The entire scheme centered on me. In the year I was born, Vincent Dong planted poison in me. Night frost poison. The name was obscure, but it was real. It was a secret formula of the Western Xia royal family, used to control their descendants. They planted the poison in a young child. Year after year, day after day, they fed it with antidotes and toxins, turning the person into something like a docile parasite. Someone with this poison would be bound to it for life. If the poison stopped, her life would end with it. One part of Vincent Dong's plan was to marry me into the royal family as empress, tightening his grip on the throne. Then he could seize power and become the true ruler in all but name. When Marcus Dong learned all this, he nearly went mad. I was the only flesh and blood he shared with Reina. He had refused to return all those years because he was afraid to see me. He couldn't bear it. But his dearest child had been poisoned so viciously by his own brother. So in secret, he joined forces with Alexander Gu. They executed the Dong clan, sparing only me. Hearing this, I finally understood why, over the past year, I'd grown sleepier and sleepier, always unable to wake. It wasn't spring fatigue or autumn drowsiness, it was the poison. I often remembered how, every ghost festival, Father would make several rabbit lanterns for me, just to cheer me up. Half my arrogance had been indulged by him. He loved me and spoiled me. It hadn't felt fake. Yet it was fake. The imperial physician said the poison had sunk deep, but I didn't need to panic. As long as night frost poison continued to sustain me, and I also took detoxifying decoctions, then in time the poison could be cleansed completely. So I truly became a little medicine jar, drinking medicine every day. Alexander Gu came to see me more often. Sometimes I said, "You're fickle. When I first entered the palace, you acted like you couldn't live without me. Now you're afraid I'll die?" Alexander Gu paused, and his tightly pressed lips slowly curved. "Sophia, you may have forgotten some things." I frowned, listening to his nonsensical words. Then he pulled a wicker puppy from his robe and handed it to me. "Alexander Gu, are you finished yet? I'm sick of these wicker toys." "I made them myself," Alexander Gu said suddenly, his head lowered as he handled my medicine. My pupils tightened. In the corner of my eye sat the dressing cabinet, crowded with more than 100 wicker trinkets. They really didn't look like something a gloomy man like Alexander Gu could make. Things at court have been unstable lately. The frontier is in turmoil. Western Xia is letting its mountain bandits cross the border. The frontier is already a mess. Alexander Gu always liked to tell me about court affairs. I heard half and forgot half. Toward the end, his words became nothing but a droning buzz. He lifted a hand and patted my head, exasperated. "Do you really hate listening to me that much?" I shot him a cold look. "I do." In 2 years inside the palace, my hatred had grown distant. After the poisoning, even more so. Alexander Gu seemed genuinely good to me. It was as if he was trying, sincerely, to love me. But it was a love I didn't dare accept and didn't want. Seeing my distance, he let out a heavy sigh. He rubbed my head and said so softly I could barely hear, "You really can't remember?" After Alexander Gu left, I turned and poured the medicine the Imperial Medical Bureau sent into the flower bed. It was year's end again. I went to the plum grove to view blossoms and ran into Marcus Dong, who had come to the palace for a banquet. He stood far away, watching me carefully. He rubbed his hands, helpless and awkward. "Sophie, after the new year I have to go to the frontier to put down the unrest. I probably won't return until April. By then it'll be warm. How about I take you to Clearwind Mountain to pick peach blossoms?" In the years when I'd lived safely, Marcus Dong came home every April. Each time, he took me to Clearwind Mountain to pick peach blossoms. They said Reina Tua loved peach blossoms more than anything. I stood there only a moment. Then I tightened my cloak and turned away. It wasn't about forgiving or not. My life was already a tangled mess. I didn't want it more tangled still. On New Year's Eve, Alexander Gu ate the reunion meal with me. The brazier burned hot, yet I still had to wear a fur-lined robe to keep from freezing. Night frost poison. What it attacked was a cold disorder. Alexander Gu handed me a hand warmer. "After the new year, I'll lead the campaign myself, together with Lord Dong." After a long silence, he added, "You have to wait for me. Wait for me to come back and give you a true investiture ceremony." Before the first lunar month ended, Alexander Gu led a vast army to the frontier. Before he left, he stood by my bed for a long time. A maid wanted to wake me, but he let me sleep. Then he placed something by my pillow. In truth, I was already awake. After he left, I opened my eyes. By the bed lay a wicker grasshopper. This winter seemed unusually short, but from the day the new year passed, I wore more and more clothing. In the end, I couldn't leave my bed. Every day I needed 3 layers of quilts, yet still felt cold to the bone. "My lady, we must tell the emperor about your condition," the maid said anxiously. I shook my head. "Don't tell him." I had stopped taking the medicine to suppress the cold poison before the new year. I didn't know what the point was anymore. I had no will to live. Alexander Gu's letter said, "The situation is very clear. I may return to court half a month early. My wife Sophia, your husband longs for you." The enclosed item was a wicker grasshopper, dirty and caked with soil. Suddenly, my cheek felt wet. I laid my hand over the words, "your husband," and traced them for a long time. My heart burned warm, but it couldn't warm my body. Today's sunlight was dazzling, just like back then by the lake. That handsome boy, always looking melancholy, seemed like a gift from the gods, set before my eyes. But now I couldn't even find myself. How could I reach for him? "Alexander Gu, in the next life, may I never meet you. Extra. Tonight is the last day of the great battle. We will regroup and return to court. At last, I can see my Sophia." I pick up a vine and, with a few quick strokes, weave a small grasshopper. These days, I always weave grasshoppers for her. I don't know whether that little fool will remember anything. That year, I was at the tutor's residence. I lived on under enormous humiliation, forced to endure life beneath the Grand Tutor. I hated myself for being powerless. I was the emperor, yet I held no imperial authority. I had let the He royal house lose face in my hands. I hated Grand Tutor Dong. I hated Mother, Dowager Empress Pei. I hated their shameless defilement of the inner palace that brought shame upon the royal family. That day, I was by the lake, trying to steady my mind. A girl who didn't know her place came over, rude and shameless, and shoved me into the water. When I was 6, someone framed me and I fell into the water. Ever since, I feared it and couldn't swim. Only later did I learn that girl was Grand Tutor Dong's only daughter, Sophia Dong. A seed of hatred was planted, and it began to sprout. But the way it sprouted was wrong. After I fell into the water, I lay unconscious for 3 days. When I woke, there was a whole table of wicker trinkets. Outside the window was the fleeing silhouette of a young girl. Beneath the wicker grasshopper was a note. In crooked handwriting, it read, "I'm sorry, Will these do as an apology? From that day on, every time I woke, there would be a new wicker trinket by the bed. The patterns gradually multiplied, but aside from the grasshopper, the other pieces were always ugly. Part of me resented her. Another part of me began to look forward to her. As a boy, I didn't understand that nameless feeling. I didn't understand how I could grow attached to the daughter of someone I hated to the bone. Looking back, perhaps I was simply too lonely. When you hide in the dark for too long, you start to long for light. Back then, Sophia Dong was like the fiercest sun of June. But I didn't have a shred of affection for Grand Tutor Dong. After Dowager Empress Pei died, I finally had the chance to take power. Years of planning, my influence already filled the court, and Grand Tutor Dong's one-man rule had long stirred public fury. My methods were clean enough. Overnight, the Dong family collapsed. Something deep in my heart drove me. I secretly spared Sophia Dong and had a blood test of kinship done with her. When I saw our 2 drops of blood disperse, I let out a breath without thinking. Later, my most loyal minister, Marcus Dong, came to me and told me the whole truth, and he blamed me for acting so swiftly. My first thought was relief. Relief that Sophia Dong truly had no relation to Grand Tutor Dong. My feelings for Sophia were complicated. I believed I hated her. I hated the humiliation she caused me in childhood. I hated that she was born into a noble house that shamed me. But that mid-autumn day, drunk, I barged into Golden Pool Palace. I saw her in white, small, curled in a rocking chair. Her face was wet with shining tears. A pang of tenderness struck me. I saw all her hatred for me. Her resistance irritated me. So I bullied her brutally. Even now, her neck still bears the marks I left. I loathed her, was angered by her, displeased by her. Yet I wanted to see her, protect her, keep her. The chaos of emotion left me unable to recognize myself. I despised that version of me. So I let Chloe stir trouble. But when I saw Sophia pinned to the floor by that eunuch, rage still swept over me. I ordered the eunuch executed and arranged for her to remain at my side with the intention of humiliating her. To see her hurt, to see her hate, to see myself reflected in her eyes, only then did I feel some release. I am the emperor, the supreme emperor. Even if things went on like this, she couldn't escape. Could she? But she tried to die. She drove scissors into her chest. Blood poured from the wound. When I arrived, her blood was already turning cold. The woman in my arms felt weightless, as if she would shatter if I held her too tightly. That night, in my fury, I finally understood. I had gone mad. For Sophia Dong, I had completely gone mad. So I began to let myself go. I willingly treated her well, told her everything, stayed by her side. I thought if days went on like this, it wouldn't be so bad. On the 3rd day of the journey back to court, an urgent courier galloped into the camp from the palace. The high consort has passed. For a moment, I didn't know what expression to wear. Marcus Dong, beside me, suddenly clutched his chest. He fainted uselessly onto the ground. But I would not faint because it couldn't be true. I rode 3 horses to death, returning to the palace through night and starlight. Mourning cloth already hung in the palace, an endless white that stabbed at my eyes. I tore it down in rage and ordered the servants to replace it with festive red. They all thought I had gone insane. Sophia lay on the bed, eyes lightly closed, quiet as if asleep. "Sophia," I called softly. She did not answer. Servants knelt across the floor, trembling, not daring to provoke my sky-shaking wrath. I gathered Sophia into my arms. From my robe, I took a newly woven wicker tiger and gently placed it in her hand. "A tiger is complicated. I don't believe you a man could make it." "I made it, Sophia. Open your eyes and look." In a single night, my hair turned white. That year, I was only 20. In the Qinghe era, Alexander Gu reigned for 31 years. The realm was prosperous and at peace. On a quiet afternoon, the emperor died. In the old emperor's hand was a yellowed wicker grasshopper, worn and shedding.